And Sanae Takaichi has polled consistently well as a contender in this LDP race, which puts her in position to potentially take office as Prime Minister in what would make her Japan's first female premier. Asia has seen a share of women taking top office, but they have tended to have one thing in common. I'm joined by senior Saiyasombut from Bangkok and Afifah Ariffin from Kuala Lumpur. Saksith, I don't know if you could see what we just saw in that short introduction, what these women have in common. That was evident from those slides. But I ask you, what do these female leaders in Asia have in common?
Now, what we're all seeing here is that all these female leaders from the past decades had a very powerful father, a literal father figure, and who was also a powerful leader of their respective countries before. And this is the topic of tonight's CNA correspondent that we are looking here, where it's pretty common in the past, in history, all across the world, where power is being passed on from a father to a son. But it's also, what we are also seeing here is that the power is being transferred from a father to a daughter here. And we just need to look at very recent examples here in Thailand. Thailand, for example, we had Prime Minister Paetongtarn Shinawatra just recently kicked out of office, and her father, of course, Thaksin Shinawatra. And if we look around a little bit further, we have, for example, the Dutertes. We have also in Malaysia Anwar Ibrahim and his daughter as well.
And adding on to what Saksith was saying, for us, what stood out was how often women leaders in Asia are being introduced into politics, especially, like he mentioned, through his fathers. And that's not a new phenomenon. We've seen how it has happened in Asia across the decades, right? But that question kept coming back to us. What does it take for these daughters to be seen as leaders in their own rights and not just extensions of their fathers? So that's really what we wanted to do in this episode, to explore that dynamic, how it plays out on a much bigger stage and in politics, where legacies can open doors, but it can also cast long shadows.
All right, Afifah, let me pick you up on that. You've looked at Ms. Nurul Izzah. She is the daughter of Malaysia's Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim, and she's 44 now. In elections in May, she was elected to the second number 2 in their party, which is the anchor party of the governing coalition. But she, in fact, has been a very active campaign. When her father was jailed in the late 1990s, she was campaigning for justice and his release. So if daughters get help from their fathers, we could equally argue daughters have been exposed to politics at a very young age when they might actually gain from their influence.
That's right, we know that looking at Nurul Izzah's career, we saw that how she had always had to balance sort of two identities. One as this reformist politician in her own right, and also the second as the daughter of Malaysia's longtime opposition leader turned Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim. She's faced, accusations of nepotism, but she's also shown resilience in carving out her own space, whether it be in parliament or in policy roles. So we're talking about someone who has earned that right to be there too. At the end of the day, she is someone who has served 3 terms as Member of Parliament. She has been, and she still is, very vocal on and advocating issues related to education access, elevating women from grassroots roles to the highest level of decision making, and of course, economic inclusion as well. But like many others that we have spoken about, people will always say that her story shows that double burden that daughters carry, having to prove themselves while always being compared to their fathers.
All right, Saksith, let me bring you in here. Is this unfair? Women, when we look at a woman, we look for her father or for her family in her pedigree, whereas men arguably might have it easier. We look at Paetongtarn Shinawatra, we think of Thaksin Shinawatra, but the current Prime Minister in Thailand, in fact, he does have political pedigree.
Indeed, Anutin Javirakun, the current prime minister, also had a very influential father. He never was a prime minister, so that's what sets the Javirakuns apart from the Shinawats. But at least in the case of Patontan here, it's very clear that she's the youngest daughter and has also been very vocal about her adoration of her father, not only as the patriarch, but also as a prime minister as well. But that became a burden in the 1 year that she was in office. People basically pointing that it was very much a very big shadow that was looming over her in these 12 months. And now that her father is in jail as well, with her holding down the fort, it's now become more or less a family project of cementing their political legacy, whatever it may look like in the future.
And I think it tells us a lot about how political power is passed on. I mean, we've seen around the world how daughters step into politics at a time when Dynasty still dominates. So it's not just about family names, it's also about legacy, as Saksith has mentioned, gender, and whether these women can chart their own paths in an environment where men have traditionally called the shots.
All right, so perhaps we could say not just getting leadership, but what you do with that leadership. Saksith in Bangkok and Afifah Ariffin in Kuala Lumpur.